Welcome MMA fans to the very first edition of Knuckle Game Spotlight, a new series from Knuckle Game Podcast where we go beyond wins and losses, beyond statistics, beyond fight week, to tell the stories that shape the athletes we watch every Saturday night. Because here, we don't just ask who won. We ask, how did they get so damn good? What made them different? What sacrifices were made when nobody was watching? Today, we're shining the spotlight on one of the fastest rising names in mixed martial arts, Joshua Van. If you've only recently started hearing his name, you're not alone. But make no mistake, the rest of the flyweight division has known about him for much longer. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why so many people believe Joshua Van isn't simply chasing greatness. He may be on the verge of becoming it. Now, before the octagon, every fighter has an origin story. Some are built inside famous gyms. Some are born into fight families. Others are shaped by circumstances far beyond the walls of a martial arts academy. Joshua Van's story begins long before bright lights, championship dreams, and UFC walkouts. Before he became one of the most exciting young flyweights in the world, he was simply a young man looking for an opportunity. Nothing about his path was guaranteed. No fast track, no shortcuts, no famous last name opening doors. Just determination and an unwavering belief that hard work could change his future. That belief would eventually carry him across continents, into a gym, and toward a career that very few people ever achieve. Because becoming a UFC fighter isn't simply about learning how to punch. It's about surviving every reason people tell you that you can't. For Joshua Van, that fight started long before anyone locked the octagon door. And in many ways, those early battles would become the greatest advantages of his career. Now, every young fighter walks into a gym believing they know what fighting looks like, or what fighting is, or how to fight. Then they spar, and reality has a funny way of introducing itself in the fight gym. A bloody nose, bruised rib, a punch you never saw coming. Those moments have humbled future champions for generations. Joshua Van was no different. Some people discover very quickly that they don't enjoy getting hit. Others discover something entirely different. That the harder the challenge, the more alive they feel. For Joshua Van, fighting wasn't about looking tough. It wasn't about social media. It wasn't about proving he was the baddest man in the room. It became a craft, an obsession, a puzzle that demanded complete commitment. Day after day, round after round. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing improvement. And that's an important distinction, because fighters who chase attention eventually hit a ceiling, and fighters who chase mastery keep getting better. Now, you can see it in Joshua Van every time he competes. Nothing he throws feels wasted. Every jab has a purpose. Every combination sets something else up. Every movement is calculated. That doesn't happen overnight. It comes from thousands of hours. Long after the cameras are gone, long after everybody else has gone home. That's where real fighters are made. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions fans have is believing the UFC is filled with overnight successes. It isn't. So stop it. It isn't. By the time a fighter reaches the octagon, they've usually spent years competing in small venues, fighting in front of a few hundred people, sometimes for very little money, driving themselves to events, sleeping in cheap hotels and motels, working regular jobs between training camps. Come on, man. The bright lights of the UFC are built on years spent in the dark. Joshua Van paid those dues. Every regional fight became another classroom. Every opponent taught him something. How to stay composed when things weren't going his way. How to win ugly when necessary. How to remain patient when the finish wasn't there. Those lessons don't show up on a record, but they become invaluable under the bright lights of the UFC. Look, man, the regional scene doesn't hand out world championships, but it does build the habits required to chase one. Now, the UFC call. Every fighter dreams about it. The phone rings. The UFC is on the other end. Years of sacrifice suddenly become one question. Are you ready? Most fighters say yes. So the question really isn't whether they're willing. The question is whether they're actually prepared. Because once you enter the UFC, nobody cares how impressive you looked somewhere else. The competition changes, man. The speed changes. The pressure changes. Every mistake becomes more expensive. Joshua Van stepped into the world's premier MMA organization carrying everything he'd built before that moment. Not hype, not promises, experience, preparation, confidence. Confidence earned the hard way, man. And almost immediately, the fans started noticing something different. He wasn't overwhelmed. He didn't fight like someone grateful to be there. He fought like someone who expected to stay. There's a difference. One mindset's about survival. The other's about competing. And Joshua Van, he came to compete. Oh, yeah. And with every performance, that confidence became impossible to ignore. Now, why is everybody talking about Joshua Van? Why is he the hot boy? Here's what separates good prospects from future contenders. Consistency, man. Anybody could have one spectacular night. Anybody could land one perfect punch. Anybody could catch lightning in a bottle. The truly dangerous fighters, they repeat excellence. Joshua Van, he began putting together the kind of performances that forced people to pay attention. Fans noticed, analysts noticed, matchmakers noticed, and perhaps most importantly, the fighters in his own division noticed or was put on notice. Because the flyweight division has always been one of the UFC's deepest talent pools, man. There are no easy fights there, no free rankings. Every climb up the ladder has to be earned, without a doubt, no question. No VIP passes, man. Joshua Van, he wasn't asking for respect. He was taking it one fight at a time, one round at a time, one clean combination at a time. Man, the further he climbed, the louder the conversation became, man. Y'all didn't recognize that? Every fight, Maybe this kid is special. Maybe we're watching the future. Maybe the next generation of flyweights has already arrived. And that's when expectations change. People stop asking whether you belong and start asking, can you defend? Now let's talk about the science of Joshua Van. Here's where Joshua Van starts to separate himself from a lot of young prospects. It's not just what he does, it's why he does it. Some fighters rely on athleticism. Others rely on toughness. Joshua Van, he relies on understanding. And just watch him, man. Watch him closely. Don't follow his punches. Follow his feet. Before he throws, he's already created angles. He's already taken away your escape. That's veteran thinking. And remember, he's still incredibly young. One thing you'll notice almost immediately is that Joshua Van rarely rushes himself. He's patient. He'll touch you with the jab, take away your rhythm, make you react. Then almost without warning, the combinations start flowing. Big bop, big bop. 3 punches, 4 punches, 5 punches. Not wild, not reckless. Everything connected. Everything smooth, man. Everything balanced. His head ain't over his knee. He ain't leaning forward. He's not chasing highlights. He's chasing clean, repeatable offense. That's championship behavior. Look, everything we've talked about so far sounds good on paper. His patience, his fight IQ, his footwork, his timing. But at Knuckle Game, we don't just tell you a fighter is special. We show you. So let's head over to the Knuckle Game Film Room, man. We're going to slow down the footage and we're going to point out a few things. And look between the punches, because that's where Joshua Van separates himself from everybody else. All right, let's head over to the film room. Okay, our first film study takes us to Brandon Royval and Joshua Van. And let me tell you something, man. This fight, it lived up to every bit of the hype. At the time, Royval was the #1 ranked flyweight in the world. Joshua Van, he was ranked number 10. On paper, it looked like experience versus potential, but inside the octagon, it became a war. 2 elite strikers, 2 high-level technicians, a battle of skill, composure, and pure will. Let's show the clip, man. Now, during the opening minute and 36 seconds, Joshua isn't chasing a knockout. He's doing something a lot of fans miss. He's walking Royval down. Royval is firing leg kicks. He's touching them with punches. He's staying busy, but Van isn't reacting emotionally. He's controlling the range. He's collecting information. He's downloading data, studying every movement Royval makes. Let's look at this clip right here. Look at the motion. Now watch what happens here. Van has steadily backed Royval towards the fence. Royval's heels are getting dangerously close to what fighters call the black line. That's, where bad things can happen, where bad things live, because your back is against the cage. Now, Van knows this, and Royval knows this. So Royval, he feels the pressure, and he decides he has to go. Now, freeze the frame right here. Now, Royval, he fires 2 quick left hands, but don't be fooled. Those punches aren't designed to land. They're bait. They're meant to distract Joshua, because the punch Royval really wanted to land is that right hand. Freeze frame, tight zone. Now look at this. Look at his stance. Look at Van's stance. He's not standing tall. He's not leaning forward. Most of his weight is sitting on that back leg. His head is already off the center line, and he's leaning back just enough to make Royval miss without wasting any movement. Now that's textbook positioning. Now let's play the clip. Now Royval, he commits, and as he drives in, throwing those two lefts, his right hand drops. Look at his right side. A huge lane appears, and Van sees this instantly. And so he gives a short pull, and he slides back just enough, 2 small steps, not 2 big ones, 2 small steps, just to be right outside of Royval's punching range. Then he comes over the top with the left hook, beautiful left hook, bang, got him. Let's watch that again. Let's watch that again. Van sees it instantly, okay? He gives a short pull. He slides back just enough out of range, slips, then comes over the top with the left. Bang! Left hook, got him. This isn't speed. This isn't luck. That's elite vision, elite fight positioning, elite timing, and a fighter who's already 2 moves ahead. But here's where Joshua Van separates himself from most fighters. He almost never throws one punch. He thinks in combinations. His fight IQ is so high, he's already planning punches 2 and 3 before the first lands. That left hook isn't the finish. It's the key that unlocks everything else. As soon as the hook lands, he immediately fires punches 2 and 3. Now watch his feet. Instead of standing in front of Royval and admiring his work, Joshua pivots off the center line while he's punching. That pivot does 2 things. First, it cuts off Royval's escape route. Second, it opens up a brand new angle for Joshua to continue attacking. Now, Royval can't fire back immediately because Joshua isn't standing where he was a split second ago. Royval has to find him. He has to find him again. He has to reset. Now, that's the difference between throwing combinations and throwing combinations with purpose. Every punch creates the next punch. Every step creates the next angle. Joshua Van isn't beating elite fighters with speed. He's beating them with preparation. Now, that's how Joshua defends. But what happens when he decides it's time to lead the dance? Now watch this. Joshua doesn't just throw combinations because he feels like it. He earns them. He wants to feel things out. So first he establishes his range. He finds his range. Then he fires this front teep kick straight to Royval's body. Bang. Not to hurt him, but to get information. Now watch Royval. He flashes the right hand, almost inviting Joshua into a check hook. But Joshua sees this immediately. He notices Royval inching forward, but instead of waiting, he beats him to the spot. Let's do this in slow motion. Now watch Joshua's lead hand. See that parry? That tiny movement cleared Royval's guard just enough. Then double jab, straight right hand, and Joshua closes the distance behind every punch. That straight right hand lands flush, chin checks Royval, and forces him backwards. That's what impressed me most. Royval had success, but almost every big exchange, Joshua won. Now, it all started because Joshua created the first opening. He wasn't reacting, he was dictating. Elite offense is one thing, but every great fighter eventually gets tested. Let's see what happens when Joshua gets hit clean. Now, in round 2, Royval, he starts finding his rhythm. Joshua lands a nice body kick, but this time he makes the mistake and he stands right in front of Royval, I guess to watch the paint dry. But Royval doesn't hesitate. He's an elite fighter. So, bang, straight left hand, right down the pipe. Ping. It catches Joshua clean. Most young fighters would have backed straight up, covered up, or panicked. Joshua doesn't do that. His instinct is to answer. He immediately fires a jab, and Royval comes right back with a hot, fresh two-piece, a hard 1-2, ping, ping. And catches Joshua. Again, those punches would have put a lot of flyweights on the canvas, no question. Joshua eats them. He regains his composure, he makes adjustments, and he keeps fighting. Now, that's something statistics never show. You can measure speed, you can measure power, but it's hard to measure a fighter's ability to stay calm after getting cracked. Joshua Van has that. Now, let's answer another question. Everybody knows Joshua can strike, but what happens when an elite wrestler gets his hands on him? Tatsuro Taira came into the fight known as the superior wrestler. And to his credit, he did get Joshua down. But here's what stood out to me. He couldn't keep him down. Every time Taira thought he had control, Joshua found a way back to his feet. Now watch this. This is interesting. He looks like he just muscles up. Then something interesting happens. Joshua stopped reacting to the wrestling. He started initiating it, stuffing takedowns, winning grappling exchanges, even scoring takedowns of his own. Now that's growth. Then watch this. Joshua takes Taira's back. He slides one hook in, his left arm slips under the chin, and he grabs his bicep, and he falls back. And he starts tightening the rear naked choke. And for a second, I thought this fight was over. But Taira does something only elite grapplers think to do. He sneaks his hand between Joshua's choking arm and his neck. And that tiny frame keeps the choke from fully locking in. And because Joshua only has one hook secured, Taira creates just enough space to escape. Even without the submission, this sequence tells us something important. Joshua Van isn't just becoming a better striker. He's becoming a complete mixed martial artist. What I tell you? You with me? You see it now? That's what film study reveals. Not just what Joshua Van does, but why he keeps getting better every time he steps inside the octagon. And as his skills continue to evolve, so do our expectations. Which brings us to the next chapter, composure under fire. Now, one of the hardest things to teach in fighting is composure. Every gym teaches combinations. Every coach teaches takedown defense. Every fighter hits mitts. But nobody can teach you how to stay calm when another professional fighter is trying to separate you from consciousness and fly your head. That comes from experience. Joshua Van has developed something coaches love to see. He doesn't panic. Watch his eyes during his exchanges. Most young fighters be blinking and backing away, freezing. Joshua Van doesn't. He watches. He processes. He adjusts. He makes the adjustment. Then he answers. That's fight IQ. And fight IQ ages better than speed because eventually every fighter loses a step. The smart ones keep winning anyway. Now, success changes things. When you're climbing the rankings, everyone underestimates you. You're the hungry prospect, the dangerous newcomer, the guy nobody has tape on. Then something changes. Suddenly, everyone is studying you. They're breaking down your tendencies, looking for weaknesses, building game plans specifically for you. Now, that's where many prospects hit a wall. Not because they stop improving, but because everyone else finally starts preparing for them. Joshua Van has entered that phase of his career. He isn't surprising people anymore. He's expected to win. That's a completely different kind of pressure. And pressure reveals everything. Can you continue evolving even after the division catches up? Champions can. We'll soon find out if Joshua Van can too. Now, every contender eventually reaches the same place. The road ends at the champion's doorstep. For Joshua Van, that former champion is Alexandre Pantoja. And this isn't just another opponent. This is one of the most complete flyweights the UFC has ever seen. A man who's fought the best, beat the best, defended the belt, and earned every ounce of respect he carries. For years, Pantoja has been the measuring stick, the question every rising contender eventually has to answer. Are you really ready? Joshua Van represents something equally dangerous: youth, momentum, confidence, the belief that tomorrow belongs to him. And when those two forces collide, combat sports gives us something special. Not just a fight, a moment. One generation protecting its throne, another trying to take it away. So, why does Joshua Van matter? Why does he matter? Sometimes a fighter becomes popular because they talk. Sometimes because they create controversy. Sometimes because they know how to sell a fight. Joshua Van is becoming popular for the oldest reason in combat sports. He can fight. Oh yeah, he can thump. Fans recognize authenticity. They recognize discipline. They recognize a fighter who keeps showing up, who keeps improving, and lets his performances speak louder than the interviews could ever. That's why his fan base keeps growing. That's why the UFC keeps giving him bigger and bigger opportunities. And that's why people inside the sport believe we've only seen the beginning. Joshua Van isn't carrying the expectations of becoming the next anybody. He's building his own legacy. One fight, one lesson, and one performance at a time. And it's stunning. And whether he leaves his next challenge with UFC gold still around his waist, or with another lesson that fuels his journey, one thing is already clear. The future of the flyweight division isn't coming. It's already here. Now, Joshua Van's story is still being written. That's what makes it exciting. We're not looking back on a completed legacy. We're witnessing one take shape in real time. Years from now, we'll know exactly where this journey led. But today, we have the privilege of watching the climb. If you've enjoyed this edition of Knuckle Game Spotlight, let me know in the comments which fighter deserves the spotlight next. Should we follow the champion, Alexandre Pantoja, a rising contender, or another name that's changing the landscape of mixed martial art? Until next time, I'm El Benga, and this is Knuckle Game Spotlight, where we don't chase headlines, we chase understanding. Keep your hands up and your chin tucked.